Hi, Chris Duff over at Serious Land Capital, Vacant Land Funding Partner. So today I wanted to comment on an issue we routinely see come up with various properties that get sent over to us, and that we have dealt with previously by not checking carefully enough. So that is where there are discrepancies with acreages that are listed on county associated resources for properties in relation to what might be found on parcel lines that are defined by satellite imagery, which is going to be typical on services like regrid, or when you actually draw parcel lines out on mapping software like Land ID, and then the gold standard is going to be a survey. So for instance here, why we're bringing this one up today is we were sent over a 95-ish acre property in Tennessee. You can actually see it reviewed live on Land Daily Diligence that I just did earlier this Monday, March 10th of 2025. If you want to take a look at that one. But when we actually did the satellite imagery using regrid, it was actually showing closer to roughly 80 acres. So massive difference in acreage from a relative as well as an absolute value basis, which can significantly impact your anticipated purchase as well as exit price if you're using the wrong data and just using what is showing up on the county website. So in situations like this, we're always going to default to what regrid shows, or again, if you're using parcel line measurements on mapping software like Land ID. And if it's a pretty basic shape, you can go ahead and just use, Land ID, and instead of having to log into regrid and finding the property that way, I mean, it's saving you a couple clicks at least. But if it's an unusual shape, a whole bunch of curves and twists and turns, large acreage tract, it generally will make sense to just dive into regrid to avoid user error and save yourself some time from that side, which made sense in this case when we were looking at this, 95 acre tract. So when you check in on that and potentially, and I should actually back up for a second there, because there might occasionally be some error from the satellite imagery if the terrain has significant contour involved. It might not track precisely the true surface area of the parcel itself in relation to the horizontal parcel lines. I know that's a little bit confusing here, but if you just take, for instance, a totally flat piece of land, just call it a square shape here, and you go ahead and measure out that acreage, that is going to be a lower number compared to if you take the exact same parcel lines and instead of just a flat square, you go ahead and raise the middle of that square, I don't know, like 1,000 feet. That naturally adds significant volume to the total landmass within that space and associated surface area. So all of a sudden, you might have an inaccurate reading from the satellite imagery, but not necessarily. I'm not positive, like on the technical stack, on whether that's taken into account from those satellite images. That's actually something I'm going to report back on, looking into this further. But nevertheless, it's not something that we'd be wanting to take a bet on when it comes to actually purchasing a property. So, we're, even if there is significant contour involved, we're still going to assume that the satellite imagery is giving us the correct acreage in relation to what was listed from the survey perspective. And this is assuming there has been no recent survey or even older survey, assuming the land hasn't changed or, had some pieces subdivided off or pieces added on. The actual acreage should be, effectively uniform, even if the survey was done 10, 20 plus years ago, if somebody actually has a copy of that. So when you go back to the seller, let's say in most cases that the satellite imagery is showing a smaller acreage compared to what is on the county side. If there's any pushback, like, hey, I know the county's saying, 95 acres that we're looking, it looks like the measurement's actually closer to 80. In this case, we can't in good conscience make a offer on the full 95 acres when there's data indicating that it's lower than that. So then, you might have to come to an agreement where part of the DD process will be getting an actual survey, assuming they don't have one done. Now, this is where you really have to weigh the pros and cons. How good is the property? How motivated is the seller for you to potentially, spot the cost of doing a survey and whatever, the going rate might be in the area, plus the time that you have to sink further into the analysis of the property. Is it something that you might be able to get the seller to share the cost for or even pay fully? That's going to be pretty rare in this industry, just given most sellers we're working with are going to be fairly motivated. Asking them to come out of pocket just to help clear up some information about the land is oftentimes going to be a hard sell, but it's worth asking and kind of gauging depending on the particular situation. So those would be a couple suggestions on how to potentially approach it. Again, every circumstance is going to be unique in relation to the underlying property and how much inherent value there might be. And again, what's the cost of the survey from both a time and monetary perspective to look further into this. Or, if the difference is pretty minor, usually like, sub, 2% or so, where you like, if something is showing 50 acres on the county site, but like, 49.2, 49.5 on regrid, we're not going to be too concerned about that. But, when it's a little bit more substantial and, you could use that rough guideline of greater than 2%, fine. I wouldn't ever worry about it if regrid is showing that, hey, there's more acreage than there is on the county website. It usually doesn't work in that direction, but that's only really going to serve in your direction. Occasionally we've seen that where we agree to purchase at a certain acreage, and then either regrid or an eventual survey shows that there was actually more acreage than expected. That's always going to be a pleasant surprise, because usually you just choose your own property unexpectedly. So in that direction, you don't need to worry about it. It's just when regrid is indicating, okay, there could be a key discrepancy there. So food for thought from that side. And again, we speak from experience. We've made plenty of these mistakes before, where now we just have a default, okay, check regrid or check the actual mapping software for every single property that we look at very early in our DD process to see if there's any discrepancy. And less than a year ago, we had bought one in Alabama where we were anticipating buying like 32-ish acres, and then based on the actual mapping software, it seemed to indicate it was a bit closer to like roughly 26 or so. So like a pretty significant gap in acreage. And we were still able to sell it profitably, not as much as we were expecting. And we didn't even get a survey, nor did the buyer require one. But it was more of a rough estimate based on the mapping software. So in that case, we keenly learned our lesson to always double check on this, no matter what property you're buying. You can't be too careful, especially in this market. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the macro sphere at the moment. So hopefully this one is helpful for you with both key tactics, what to look out for, how to approach this with sellers, and continue to be conservative with your land purchases. So with that, if you are looking for any funding, check out seriousland.capital. Had a ton of deals that we reviewed earlier today. A couple pretty interesting ones, and land daily diligence, which I mentioned earlier, Monday and Thursday, zero cost review of your land deals, and landpricer.ai. Beta test invite should be coming out very shortly. My engineering team just provided a bigger update, had a couple bugs to work through regarding the actual pricing summaries, but we are getting closer there to fix the remaining key issues before we can go live. With that, take care. See you on the next one. Subscribe and share if this was helpful. Bye.